Welcome, Mr. Acaba, and we're so excited for you to join us here today. So we're live to these different campuses, and we're kind of giving people just an idea of what life is like after college. Sometimes when you're in college, you don't really know what you're going to do or how your journey is going to end up. And we just thought your specific journey was amazing. So after you graduated from college, you joined the Peace Corps. Tell us a little bit about how you ended up joining the Peace Corps and what that experience was like.
Sure. First of all, I want to thank everyone for coming and joining us today. You know, you think NASA has all this cool technology. This is the first time I think we've done this, so it's pretty neat to be going to all these different universities. So I'm pretty excited about this. When I graduated from college, I had no idea where I was going to go. Of course, I never thought that I was going to be an astronaut. So you never know where you're going to end up. I'm from Southern California and went to public school there. And actually, when I graduated from high school, I didn't want to go to college. I told my Dad, I'm done with school. I don't want to go to college. He started to come at me, but he didn't quite kill me. But he did convince me, what, go to college for a year. And if you don't like it, we can live with that. But, my parents came from Puerto Rico, and the most important thing for them was an education and then public service. My dad was in the National Guard. So growing up, education was always a part of what was kind of in our thought process, as well as public service. So went to the University of California in Santa Barbara. I'm a geologist, so I know we got the mine school out there. So after my bachelor's degree in geology, I was very interested in the Peace Corps. I joined the Marine Corps while I was in college, so I was in the Marine Corps Reserve at the time. So I know it doesn't sound right, Marine Corps, Peace Corps, they're kind of different. I'm in the Corps, now I'm in the astronaut Corps, so you never know where you're going to go. And so I just was really interested in the Peace Corps, and then I had an advisor one day that was talking about minorities in geology, and he had me apply for a grant to get my master's degree. And so what I would say, when you think about the Peace Corps, like we were talking about earlier here, I'm not trying to convince you to join the Peace Corps because it definitely is not for everyone. But the advantages of joining the Peace Corps are many, and I'll get to those a little bit later. And so my advisor said, hey, we can get you this grant to continue with grad school. And, really having that option between going and getting an advanced degree or joining the Peace Corps, it was a fairly easy decision to go ahead and get my master's degree, which I'm glad I did because I wouldn't be here today without it. So obviously you guys chose to go to college, so that's a good start. But I was, school education is extremely important. You never know where it's going to take you. So I went to grad school, worked as a hydrogeologist for a while, but the Peace Corps was always, in the back of my mind, something that I wanted to do. And so there became a point in my career where I said, what, I think I'm ready to make that leap to join the Peace Corps. And it's hard to go from being a professional, and you're finally making money after all this time in school, to going back and now you're going to be a volunteer and pretty much be poor for the next couple of years. But that public service is, it's something I wanted to do, so I went ahead and did the paperwork. The Peace Corps originally denied me. They said that my education was too high and they thought I'd be bored, and so I had to write a letter to the Peace Corps. I'm not sure who that recruiter was, but you made me work hard to become a volunteer. So, finally I was accepted. My class was supposed to go to Russia as the first set of environmental education volunteers in Russia. That got postponed, so we ended up going to the Dominican Republic, which was great. And it's scary. When you first, you leave your house to go to a different country, there's a lot of anxiety, all the unknown. We met as a group in Miami, and you kind of get together for a couple of days before you go to their host country. And, it was neat because you start to form these friendships that you have, for the rest of your life. But Peace Corps is hard. A lot of things don't go right. We may have some problems here today, and being a Peace Corps volunteer has definitely helped me to think on my feet. You learn how to deal with adversity a lot. You learn to be very, very responsible. I lived out in a community that had electricity maybe 60% of the time. Every night we would lose it. The same with water, it would be turned off around 5 p.m. So we had trash cans that you would fill up with water. So if you wanted to bathe at night, you just kind of do a little bucket bath. So there's a little bit of just living out on your own. And I would have never thought that the experience that I had in the Peace Corps living on my own would really translate to living on my own on the International Space Station. Because once again, you're in a very different environment, one you're not used to, away from your family, and what's comfortable to you.
Right.
But I can't say enough about the Peace Corps, what it's done for me, the friendships that I made, all of these things have just been extremely valuable. So if you're adventurous, you're willing to take a risk, I think it's a good thing to do. They're telling me to do something, so it's okay. You want to get closer? All right.
So when you were serving in the Peace Corps as an environmental education volunteer, how did you use your degree? Because a lot of times people aren't really prepared. Okay, I'm going over. I think a lot of people think when they go to Peace Corps, I'm just going to volunteer. I don't think a lot of people understand that you really need a specific skill set. You really need skills and experience in a certain area. Because eventually what you're doing is you're taking that skill set over to these countries to help develop a sustainable project or sustainable program to help these people survive. So tell us a little bit about the environmental education project that you did while you were in the Dominican Republic.
Yeah, that's a great point where I think early on in the Peace Corps, if you have these practical skills, you can build into a different country. We still do that today. We've had volunteers that had a lot of farming experience, so they went into that field. But for me, as a geologist, and I was an environmental geologist, to go in and work as an environmental educator, a lot of the concepts that we use here in the States would translate directly to what we did in the Peace Corps. If you're talking about deforestation, we're talking about your soil capacity, contamination, the groundwater. So those are all things that I learned in school, I worked on as a professional, and directly used when I went to the Peace Corps. But you got to be careful because a lot of us graduate from college, you think you're really smart, which you all are, obviously. But you go to these countries, and there's a lot of smart people that are there. They may not have the formal degree that you have, but their understanding of the environment and how to work in that environment is really, really important. So you got to find that balance between using your technical knowledge and then working with the people that are in the country. So for me as a geologist, it was a direct translation in using that, and I think that was beneficial.
That's really good. When you were there, what did you feel was the most impactful experience during your 2 years of service there? Was it the work itself? Was it the people? Was it a combination? How did you feel? What did you feel was most impactful to you?
Yeah, I think it's a combination between the personal side, the people that you meet, and the technical part. Most people that graduate from college, you have goals in mind, things that you want to accomplish, and we're very goal-oriented in the United States. So some of the hard things about being a Peace Corps volunteer is that you go there and you set your goals, and they don't always work. My first reforestation planning, spent months working with another company in the Dominican Republic. They were going to donate the trees, donate the vehicles, got my community together, and then 2 days before the event, they just backed out. And so now I'm stuck with, well, what am I going to do now? My community coming together. So there's a lot of things that go wrong. And so you need to be ready for that. And as a person that wants to get things done, that was difficult. But the people you meet in the Peace Corps, not only the people in the host country, which were awesome. While I was out there, my parents came to visit me and they lived in my little house. My sister came out. And so they had a chance to see where I was living. But just the people in my community, they really took me in. And I think every Peace Corps volunteer will tell you that. They'll talk about the people that they've met, and a lot of us go back to our host countries to visit. So you have that part of it, but then you also have the other Peace Corps volunteers that will become lifelong friends. I've got a couple that one is now working for the State Department, another one's working for the Forest Service. And so we have formed these friendships that we've maintained over the last, so I am getting old, it's been a long time. So it does go by quickly. So we have that personal relationship, but we also have a professional relationship. My buddy Jeff that works for the Forest Service, we signed a Space Act agreement between NASA and the Forest Service, and so I took a little Smoky Bear with me up into space. And so that would have never happened had it not been for the Peace Corps and that friendship. So you never know who you're going to meet, and you'll be surprised at how many places you'll go to, and you'll meet people that are returned Peace Corps volunteers. You know, networking is an important thing. I'm not telling you to join the network, but if you think the Peace Corps is not going to help you in the future, that is an incorrect thought, because there's a lot of good things that come out of it.
One of the things that you mentioned when we were speaking earlier was in regards to public service. That's one of the unique things about the Peace Corps organization. It's really about service and making a difference. As you were talking to a young college person that was totally clueless, they're like, I'm in school, I'm getting this degree, I don't know what I can do with this degree. I'm thinking about the Peace Corps, but I don't really know how going to another country for 2 years is going to help translate to that into my future career endeavors. You were saying, you know, you have other friends that are now working in state departments, working service. How does your Peace Corps service journey help you in taking your next steps towards your next career? So when you came back from the Dominican Republic, what did you say when you came home? Like, okay, I'm back home. Now what?
Yeah, exactly. What am I going to do now? Because you're so busy doing your job that you really don't get a lot of time to plan for your future when you get out of the Peace Corps. There's a lot of services out there to help you, a lot of grants that are out there if you want to go back to school. So there's a lot of advantages. I think they give you a little stipend. I don't know what it is today to help you get yourself back into the United States. But it does take some time. But the skills that you learn as a volunteer, they're going to help you with whatever job you take. So when I left the Peace Corps, didn't know what I was going to do, was maybe going to go back to grad school, ended up getting a job working in the Bahamas, managing a research center. And so I went from living in a small community in the Dominican Republic to now living on an island in the Bahamas that was really small, it was 1 square mile, and we had 8 Americans living on it. And then Bahamians would come back and forth to work. So I went from one environment that I was really isolated to one that was equally as isolated. And I never would have thought that was going to happen. But by being in the Peace Corps, and when people see that, they realize, you know, this person can handle that type of condition. And so I think, you know, you never know how you get hired to become an astronaut, but I'm sure one of the things they looked at is that they're probably going to send this guy to the International Space Station. He's going to be living on his own. Can you handle that? And so now you have, you know, proof that you're someone that can go out, live on your own, and be responsible and get things done. And so that was really helpful.
That's definitely one of the things that people want to do. Oftentimes you are putting countries in situations where maybe you don't have, like we do here in our regular work, we have like standard operating procedures or books that we can go to and go to. When you're out there in the field, you're literally just kind of assessing what the situation is and then taking skills and using it. After you came back and you, after coming back from serving in the Peace Corps, you continued really in an amazing journey of a life of service in different service capacities, different service organizations. How on earth did you eventually end up here in a flight suit at the NASA Johnson Space Center? How does that happen?
Yeah, it still amazes me that I'm here. It was a long journey that, you know, started with the education. So without that, I wouldn't be here. Most astronauts have an advanced degree, so having that master's in a technical field like geology was very, very helpful. But so I went various jobs. It seemed like I could hold a job for more than 2 years. This is, I think, the longest job I've ever had. But I was working as a middle school teacher in Florida, and one of my coworkers said, "Hey, I found the news that NASA wants to hire some educators to become astronauts." That's interesting. So I went on the internet and I started looking at the requirements, and I felt like I met most of those. And so went through the process, and with a little bit of good luck, I happened to get hired. So I was hired in 2004 as an educator astronaut. 3 of us came in. So that's kind of how I got here.
Very cool. Well, I know I've had a chance to ask a lot of questions because you're obviously here too, but we're also taking questions from a lot of our students around our campuses. So we actually have a question that just came in from Mike at Baylor University. He wants to know, Tell us about the space station and how long were you there?
Hey, Mike, how you doing? So I've had two flights. I did a shuttle flight in 2009, so that was about 13 days. Went up on Discovery. We went to the space station and installed a set of solar arrays on the space station. So that was my first mission. It was a great experience to have served on the space shuttle. And then last year, I spent 4 months on the International Space Station, and it was cool. So it was a lot different when you go from 2 weeks to now 4 months. It was good. So most expeditions now are between 4 to 6 months.
And then how long does it usually take you all to prepare before you actually get in the shuttle to go up in space?
It's a long time. If you think school is long, you want to become an astronaut, you go back to school. I feel like I'm in school every day. So when you first get hired, we have 18 months where you're considered an astronaut candidate, and you're learning the basic skills that you need to be an astronaut. After that point, you graduate, you're now considered an astronaut, and now you're eligible to be assigned to a flight. So you have that original 18 months, and then to prepare for my shuttle flight, it was about another year and a half. And in between, you're working technical jobs. And then for my long duration flight, it's about 2 to 2.5 years of training before you go.
So the training is constant training. It just never stops.
It never stops.
Sometimes in college, when we're young and in college, we think, oh, once I'm done with this, I never have to go back to school. That's so not true. In this day and age, you're ever learning.
You're always learning, and actually, I'm going back to school now to get another master's in education. So
very cool.
Life is a never-ending story of learning.
That's very true. One of the really neat things that you've gotten to share with us that we've had a chance to see, but our audience hasn't had a chance to see, is a really cool video of you in space, I believe. So right now, we'd like to go to that video and run that video, and then I guess you can walk us through kind of what we're looking at.
It'll be a short 3-minute video, so we'll take 4 months on the International Space Station and condense it down to a real quick video just to give you an idea of what it's like to be in space. And we'll see if it works. So I was part of, and I'm going to kind of look at the video, so I think that's okay for you guys out there. So I was part of Expedition 31 and 32. It's a little complicated on how they get those numbers. And basically, it depends on the crews that are up there. And this is my first set of crew members. We were together for about 2 months. And it truly is an international space station. I flew up with the Russians on the Soyuz vehicle. We had guys in the Netherlands. We had Aki from Japan. So really, it's an international endeavor. So here we are in Kazakhstan getting ready to get in our capsule. And this is a little bit different than a shuttle flight. We're out in the middle of nowhere in Kazakhstan. This is our launch. And it takes about 8.5 minutes to get into orbit. So you go from 0 miles an hour to 17,500 miles an hour in 8 minutes. So it's quite the ride. It's pretty cool. And it took us 2 days to get to the International Space Station. It's all docked with them. But it's great once you get out of your small capsule and get on your space station. We were lucky enough to have the first Dragon, which was a commercial vehicle, come up to the space station that we would grab, attach to the space station, and unload the cargo. So the Peace Corps experience being international definitely applies in this case. So you can see the space station is a complicated place. It's a laboratory. It allows us to do all types of experiments, intense stuff with fire, fluid flow. The Russians blew the satellite out. Here's my second job here right and left. That is a video. And so we had a couple of spacewalks done on this station. I was inside flying the robotic arm, while Sonny and Alfie were outside and they got on the robotic arm. On my shuttle flight, I had done 2 spacewalks. And then we also had the Japanese cargo vehicle come up, and this is an HTV. And again, you have to grab that with the robotic arm and attach it, and there it goes, leaving the space station, and it will burn up in the atmosphere. Those are some cool shots. Water there from these days in space. You never get tired of going in space every day, and you come out in your 3/4 and you float across the lab, you really kind of think yourself in space. It's really happening. And it's amazing how quickly the body is sort of that. You feel like you were born there. Amazing ASU people, that was my view of ASU. The food is good on orbit. Exercise, we do a couple of hours every day. Here I am running on the treadmill. We have a great device that will allow us to exercise on orbit. Bone loss, muscle atrophy is really a big deal. And we work out a lot. And then after 4 months, it's time to come home. And here we are landing again in Kazakhstan. And you can see it's not the most gentle of landings. Not like the space shuttle that lands a lot like the airplane. And so after 4 months, you hop back in a plane and you come on back to Houston. And then you have to deal with gravity again. Gravity is a lot stronger than you would think. We kind of get used to it every day, of course, living here. But after being gone for 4 months, it definitely takes a little bit of time to get back to living on Mother Earth.
Wow. That's amazing. That's absolutely amazing.
So I was talking fast, but just wanted to give you an idea of what you were looking at during the video.
It's funny because as I watched the video and you were kind of narrating through it, I was thinking in terms of just how really and truly life has a way of repeating itself. Because you kind of started your journey like innocent, we're going into this foreign place, into this completely different situation that you didn't know, and then to fast forward just a couple of years later to be in an international space station. Tell us a little bit of what it's like to work with people in an international environment.
Yeah, I think that's another great skill that I didn't talk about is that international experience, and especially in today's world, we're all connected like we are today. So it's very likely in whatever job you will get, you're going to be working with international partners, and it's not really something you can just learn in school. You can talk about dealing with other people, dealing with other cultures, but until you actually experience it, it's just hard. That's something that's hard to learn in the classroom. Mm-hmm. And so I would say, in today's environment, with the way that we are all connected, understanding how to work with other cultures, the value that they bring, how you mix your ideas with their ideas to come up with one good product is really, really important.
Awesome. We're going to take one more question. We have a question from Jamie at Oklahoma State University. Jamie says, we are developing, space habitat. What would you most like to see?
In the habitat or?
In the habitat.
In the habitat. So, we don't ever feel bad for astronauts that are in space because it's actually it's a pretty comfortable environment. But there are things that are extremely important. One of them is having some kind of private space that you can call your own. We have our crew quarters, and it's about the size of a really small closet. But in there, that's where you sleep, and you can sleep in the vertical. So I slept pretty much standing up, for the whole time. But having that little bit of space is really, really important. So if we're going into deep space, you want to make sure that you've accommodated some room for the crew member to, just kind of get away, either talk to family, watch a movie, whatever it is. Everybody needs their downtime. The food is probably the other most important thing. So you're going to need to find a way to, carry your food. Are you going to grow your food? What are we going to do as we go into deep space? Right now we just have cargo vehicles that come up on a regular basis to bring us our food. But if we're going out further and way out there, you're going to need some kind of mechanism to have your food with you, to grow your food. One of my crewmates, he grew plants on orbit, and we've done various experiments with that. So that's a possibility. And don't get so hung up on 1G. A lot of times we make things thinking about living on Earth and everything has to be, horizontal, vertical, labeling, whatever it may be. When you get in space, it doesn't matter up and down. It has really no priority. So kind of think outside the box and think about, here I am. I'm sitting on this chair. So if I need water, I can reach over and grab it. But in space, things are floating all over the place. And so you need your hands either to hang on to something or your feet have to hang on to something. So try to make things that are easy to access with one hand, because you're always going to have to use at least one or two body parts just to stabilize yourself. So there's a lot that goes into it. I guess we could talk all day about that. I'd love to hear what ideas that you guys have on that, so maybe I'll get out to your school sometime and talk to you about it.
Cool. We have a question from Peter. He's at the University of Colorado Boulder, and he's saying, what space exploration mission should be a priority and why?
Yeah, I think everybody agrees that the work that NASA does is extremely important, and I think a lot of people would say, do we want to send humans out? Do we want to send robots to different planets? Do we want to send satellites out there? And I think they all have their place. So looking at the human side of it, it really makes sense to send a vehicle out, kind of do a recon of a planet, or maybe going, send a robot out there to let us know what the environment's going to be like, to maybe find a location that we might want to study, and then that sets us up for human exploration. So really the priorities, it's a national organization, so what are the national priorities? Do we really want to send humans to Mars and beyond to get our hands on there, because there are limitations on what robots can do, on the information you can get from a satellite. But there's no denying the great work that we've had on Mars with the rovers that are out there. The Hubble telescope is taking us places that we never would have thought we'd know about. So, it's hard for me to give a priority, because I think you really need to have all three of those going on at one time.
Okay, thank you. We do have a question that just came in from Texas A&M University down in College Station. Do you miss being on the space station, being back down here at Earth?
Totally miss it. If I could, I'd be there right now. As soon as I landed, I told my boss, be back in line, because I definitely want to go back. Earth is great, and when you come back and you smell the Earth, you feel the wind, the breeze, all that kind of stuff. You get around your family and friends, all that's great. But space is awesome. So if you ever get a chance, you definitely want to go to space. The view is killer. You can spend all day looking out the window and enjoying the Earth from a couple hundred miles away. So I miss it, and I hope to get back there as soon as possible.
That's awesome.
4 months wasn't long enough.
So when you're up there, you're just in space. What are some of the things that you all do? I mean, like most of us are going to work from 8 to 5 and then we're home, but you're there. It's 24/7. So what do you do in that 24-hour period?
Yeah, it's a busy time, and so we have a work day. Basically, we get up around 6 a.m. We use the Greenwich Mean Time. That's just our clock that we use there. So you get up at 6. We have a meeting at 7 with the Mission Control Center. So you have an hour in the morning just to do what you do at home before you go to work. Our commute is just a little bit shorter.
Right.
And then basically you're going to work from 7:15 in the morning up until the last meeting that you have around 7 p.m. So in that time, you're doing work on science experiments. You're maintaining the space station. It's your home, so just like on a weekend, you guys may fix the plumbing, paint the house. We're constantly maintaining the space station. We have to work out for about 2.5 to 3 hours every day, so that takes a chunk of time. In there, you try to eat lunch and you try to have dinner somewhere else. So it's a busy time. And then in the evenings, just like, you'll go home at the end of the day and unwind, and you get together as a crew, have dinner, watch videos that maybe set up from Earth, or just look out the window and just relax. So it's busy, but we're getting a lot of good science done in those 12 hours that we're actually working.
Oh, that's awesome. Very cool. We just got another question from Kurt at Arizona State University. Which was tougher but more rewarding? The Peace Corps, the Marine Corps, or being in space? You've done a lot, Joe, so it's a lot to choose from.
Yeah, that's a tough question. So Marine Corps, I would say they all had their challenges. The Marine Corps was definitely a physical challenge, but also a mental challenge, because they take you from just being a regular person into making you, a Marine, a soldier out there. So that had its own challenges that I was able to handle when I was 19 years old that I might have a hard time doing today. The Peace Corps was probably the scariest, because for me, it was the first time that I'm really going far away from my family, going somewhere, we've traveled before, but nothing like that, and not knowing where you're going to end up, what the living conditions are going to be like. So the unknown is always scary. But being an astronaut has probably challenged me in a different way, in that there's just so much information that we have to learn in a relatively short period of time. So you're constantly pushing yourself to learn more. You have that fear of failure. You're in an important job, and you don't want to screw it up, but it happens, and so you have these other challenges as an astronaut. So I know it's kind of a cop-out. Maybe being a school teacher was harder than all of them, dealing with middle school kids.
I've heard. I've heard that's a little bit challenging. It's got its own challenges. That's great. So we have a question from Colorado, from the Colorado School of Mines. Jordan would like to know, how important will the private sector be in the future of space exploration?
That's a good question, Jordan. And if you've been following NASA at all, we've had some very successful launches of private cargo ships that have gone up. So SpaceX has gone up, and they had the Dragon vehicle, and then we had Cygnus that went up and sent another vehicle up to Earth. So we're doing things now with the private sector that people would not have imagined, 5 years ago. People say, private sector, they can't do it. But there's a lot of smart people out there. NASA has a lot of smart people. We have a lot of good experience, but there's also a lot of engineers out there that are explorers and they're engineers and they can make these things. And so what the private sector does is it's those guys working on stuff that is, say, relatively easy, going from Earth to the International Space Station, which is not easy, and that frees up resources for them. NASA can look at exploring further into the solar system. So I think the partnership with the private companies is extremely important.
Yeah, we're becoming a world that we're all interconnected. Really, from internet, social media, everything is just really kind of interconnected. We're not that age, and we're just all kind of individually doing our own world and kind of working together. We have another question that's coming in from Gabe. He's also out of Arizona State University. He's at their Poly campus. How do you feel about lunar colonization?
Yeah, Gabe, I would love to be the first one to sign up for that. So when that list comes up, if you're interested, knock you down, you can get behind me. I think it's a natural kind of evolution that we will end up, on the moon or on Mars and have people living there. It's just, a lot of people will argue that if you're a single planet species, you're not going to survive, and they look at the dinosaurs. But even beyond that, whether we are exploring deep space, the deep ocean, as human beings, we like to explore, and that's just what we do. I can't tell you why. So I think that having colonies on other planets I think it's going to happen, and I would love to sign up for that.
We made it to the moon, I'm sure. At some point in time, we can figure that out.
Yes, we can, and I want to be there.
We have Brandon. He is actually at one of our high schools that is joining us. He's joining us from Astronaut Academy out of Dallas, Texas. He would like to know, what is the longest you've been in space?
So my longest mission was the previous one, and it was 4 months. It was about 125 days, something like that. But we do have an astronaut that's assigned to go up in 2015. Scott Kelly, he's going to be up there for a year. So it's a lot longer. So for me personally, it was 4 months. I'd love to go back and spend more time. After 4 months, I was definitely not ready to come home. I wish I could have stayed longer. But there's a lot we have to learn about the human body, and so we'll learn a lot with Scott being up there for a year. But yeah, I think that we're going to start staying up there longer and longer. Yeah, but it goes by fast. Yeah, space is great.
I'm sure. We do have another question from the University of Utah. They would say, what advice would you give to potential Peace Corps volunteers or astronauts?
I guess the one piece of advice I would give anybody, you guys are now in college, and hopefully you pick some kind of field of study that you really, really enjoy. We talked about the challenges of being in the Marine Corps, the Peace Corps, an astronaut, or a school teacher. And while they were all required a lot of work, it doesn't seem like work when you do something that you really, really enjoy. So if you're doing something that you don't really like, but maybe you think, well, it's going to pay me better, or, you have these various reasons to do it, I would say really think about doing things that you enjoy, and they'll lead you in a really good direction. And then no matter what happens after that, you're happy where you are at that moment. So for a Peace Corps volunteer, be sure that's what you want to do. Because we've had people that have gone and not done well. So it really does require you to think about it, and it's a sacrifice. It's not just going out and hanging out with your buddies in some other country. You're definitely making a personal sacrifice. So make sure you want to do that. And for people that want to become an astronaut, it's hard to become an astronaut just because there's not a lot of it. So again, do jobs that you like that will lead you in that direction. And that way, if you don't become an astronaut, you won't look back and go, man, I wasted the last 10 years trying to do this thing that I think I'm never got. So do what you like and have fun.
Enjoy it. Okay, we have Steve. He's actually a return Peace Corps volunteer. He's coming to us from the University of Utah as well. He said, would you consider Peace Corps again in retirement?
Yes. I've always thought about going back to the Peace Corps, and I would be surprised if I don't go back. I may not wait until retirement, but it really was an awesome experience. And again, I'm not trying to convince anybody, but for me personally, it was definitely life-changing, and I've learned a lot since I was, I don't know, I must have been 23 or something like that, some young kid, like you guys now I'm old. But, I've gained a lot of experiences that I would love to take back to not only share with the people that I'm working with in that country, but some of the younger volunteers that are out there that think they know everything like I do. So I would love to go back and be a volunteer. It was cool.
Be able to make a difference, and that's really what it's about. And I'm sure it would be different going back now that you've had more experience and involved, and being able to take all the experiences you've had over these years to take that back and make a difference in the lives of those young people. We're going to take one more question. We're going to take another question from Ricardo. He is out of Arizona State at their college campus, and Ricardo wants to know, what did your first step on the space station feel like? That's a great question.
That is a good question, and I guess my first step was really a pull. It's funny, we talk about doing spacewalks and things like that, but you're actually using your hands to move yourself through the space station, being in zero gravity, microgravity. I guess the first thing that struck me was the smell. So I went from being on the space shuttle for a couple of days, and now you're in the space station, and it has a very unique smell. I wouldn't say that it's good or bad, but it has a smell. When I went back the second time, I went, all right, I'm back again to the space station. But it was, it's amazing because the space station is so big that when you pull yourself in there, you're amazed by how big it is, how complicated it is. But it was a wonderful experience. It's a first step or a pull that I'll never forget.
Now, when you say you're pulling yourself, so you really have to have a lot of upper body strength when you're out there to be able to constantly using your arms to pull?
Yes, it depends on what you're doing. So every day in a module, and Karen Nyberg, who is on the space station now, who will come back, she's got hair like this, and she did an experiment where she could take a strand of hair. I haven't seen the video, but if you look for it, it's out there somewhere. And so you can actually push yourself off of the wall with a strand of hair. So you don't need a lot of force if you're just working in the space station. So if you were to get yourself in the middle of a module and you were small enough, you'd be stuck there and you couldn't move. So the resistance is very low, but when you go out and do a spacewalk, that's a different story because now you're in a really bulky suit. And so you have a lot of mass now, which does require some strength in the regulated suit. So depending on where you are, it can be the easiest thing or it can be the most difficult.
And when you're in the suit, on average, how heavy is that? I mean, when you're in a complete state, how heavy is that? How much weight are you carrying?
So the spacesuit to do a spacewalk, I believe, is around 300 pounds. And so when we train here in Houston, we'll train in a really big swimming pool. And so they have the suit on a rack, and then you step under it and into it. Then they lift you up, and they put you in the water, and then you can practice your spacewalk. So you wouldn't be able to walk with the suit because it's so darn heavy. The suit that we used on the shuttle was about 80 pounds, and so that's manageable that you can walk around with. So it depends on what suit, but they're heavy.
Wow, that's a lot.
It's like a little spaceship.
It is, literally is. We have a question from Mia. Mia with the University of Texas at El Paso. He's a minor. He He wants to know, what is your biggest accomplishment with NASA, and what is your biggest accomplishment with Peace Corps?
I guess with NASA, they haven't kicked me out yet, so that's a big accomplishment. I think just having the opportunity to fly on the space shuttle was really neat, and to be part of that history. But I guess the two hardest things I did, one was doing the spacewalk, and so it's scary. And so when you kind of, live through that fear and kind of overcome it, it's quite the accomplishment. And some of the work that I had to do with robotic arm is challenging. And so when you can do those things, you feel like you made a great accomplishment. With the Peace Corps, I think that, I think I represented the United States really well, and that's a big part of what the Peace Corps does. You're not only there to help the people who live in that country, but you're an ambassador for the United States. And so you really want to conduct yourself, as you want people to think about Americans. And so I think not just the work that I did, but the relationships that I formed with the people that live in the Dominican Republic was really important.
Okay. We have another question from the University of Colorado Boulder. What's your favorite thing to do in the zero G?
Zero G is cool. I mean, you never get tired of floating. And again, every morning when I would come out of my crew quarters and I was be dark, I'd be the first one that would wake up, and then I would just push myself through the lab, and the space station's dark and it's quiet. And then I had a period of time where I was the only American on board for about 2 weeks. There were 2 Russians and myself, so I really had a big part of the space station all to myself. And just, not worrying about what is up and what is down. And your body is just amazing you just get into a position that works for the job that you're doing. So I think just floating around, I'm a comic hero dude, and so, I love Spider-Man and Superman, and you feel like that because you can just fly through the air. But the view from space is pretty spectacular.
Awesome. It sounds like a lot of fun. I would love to do that. And we have Matt. He is coming to us from the question from the Colorado School of Mines. Harder to get into NASA or to get into Peace Corps?
Well, I think if you're talking about NASA as an organization, the cool thing about NASA is that a lot of people think of the astronaut, and we're lucky that we get the opportunity to fly in space. But NASA is a huge organization. That we have engineers, we have people that work in our public affairs, we have technicians, we have divers. So we have a wide range of people that work for NASA. So I think that it's to get a job at NASA, it's going to be challenging, but it's definitely doable. Getting in the Peace Corps, I haven't done it for a long time, but like I told you, they want me to join. So
pretty competitive.
It is a competitive
Very
market.
competitive.
And, they want to make sure they're getting the right person, and they don't want to set you up for failure. And so you'd rather know earlier than later if this is something that, I'm really cut out to do. So I know that it's competitive to get into the Peace Corps nowadays. Very much so. So good luck. If you get in, you won't regret it.
We have David. He's also at the Colorado School of Mines. Talk about a failure, either with the Peace Corps or NASA, that you've experienced professionally.
David, you're killing me. I'm going to have to get on a couch and tell my woes.
It's going to be a little bit therapy.
That's good. The Peace Corps, you have failures all the time. And that's one of the great things that you learn about. And I think the biggest one was that very first reforestation project that I was trying to organize that didn't go so well. And so, lesson learned is, okay, what could I have done better? And you kind of got to take that experience and take the good parts of it, but then throw the rest of it away and not dwell on it. At NASA, I've had a lot of failures that I've done, some worse than others. But on my very first spacewalk, things didn't go as planned, and I made a fairly big mistake that would be, it stinks when you make a mistake and, you've been trained for so long, you get this great opportunity, but just like in the Peace Corps, you need to learn from that mistake and you got to move forward. So, if you never had any failures in life, you're probably not trying hard enough because, you want to push yourself to do things that aren't always comfortable, but I think what you get out of that is extremely valuable. So we can sit down for a long time and talk about failure. Trust me.
It helps to build you. And, it's funny because oftentimes failure kind of leads you on the journey and the path that you eventually take. You think coming out of college you're going to do one thing, and then life happens, and it just takes you on a completely different path. And so the failures actually kind of help you grow as you go along. So that's very good. That's a very good point. I think we have time for one more question.
All right.
We're going to take one more question from the field. So if you guys have one last question, we'll go ahead and take that now. In the meantime, Joe, when you see yourself in the future, and we know NASA doesn't last forever, what do you see yourself wanting to do and being able to look back on this journey after you finish with NASA?
Yeah, so short term, I'd love to. I want to stay with NASA and get back into space and have another opportunity to do that. But even now, I'm thinking about what might I do when I leave NASA. That's why I'm going back to school in education. And so for me, it just seems that public service has been really important in my life, and I think it's extremely valuable. So, I'll be looking back or looking ahead and seeing, what kind of opportunities are out there, whether it be, joining the Peace Corps again, working in the public school system. So there's a lot of things out there that we can do just to make the world we live in, a little bit better. It sounds corny and all that. And, my dad, he almost killed me when I told him I wanted to be a volunteer. He said, well, I didn't, move to this country for you to be poor and be a volunteer, but there's a lot of things that we can do that have a lot of value to it. So, I think when I find out what I want to do when I grow up, I'm hoping I can look back and, be proud of that public service that I've done.
Amazing. You've made a huge impact and a huge difference. I think just one of the things that as I was going through your bio and just reading your journey, I was just so impressed with the fact that you were actually the first person in sanitarian to go into space. And that in and of itself I'll be honest, made me a little bit nervous because I was like, I'm going to be interviewing history, so this is really
a little bit of history. Puerto Rican guy.
Yeah, that's a huge part of history. But I think that's just being able to make that type of impact, not just here in the United States, but around the world. Is that's huge, and that's one of the things that we, the Peace Corps, really like to see people do is going into the world and making an impact. We'll take one last question. It's going to come from Baylor University down in Waco. It's from Rebecca, and she says, the Peace Corps, Marine Corps, and space. Very courageous. Do you see something unique in yourself that allows you to live this life?
Nothing that I would have, recognized as a young kid or anything that, when people heard that I became an astronaut or I wanted to join the Peace Corps, they all thought I was crazy, whether it be the Marine Corps, the Peace Corps, or the Astronaut Corps. So I don't think there's any one characteristic that I can look at that, kind of pulled me in this direction. Like you said, life happens, and, going back to school and getting that advanced degree, it opened up a door for me, and I kind of walked through that door, but not knowing where it was going to take me. And then doing the Peace Corps, it did the same thing, where now I had new opportunities. Then you combine that with the Marine Corps, just all of those little, if I were to look back and had to make the perfect plan, this is what I would have done, but I would have never thought to do that. I tell my dad this was all part of my master plan. So, I don't know what that characteristic is other than, I like a little bit of adventure, and I don't mean, cliff diving or things like that, but just trying things that are a little bit uncomfortable and enjoying them and just seeing where it takes you. Life is good.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. We really appreciate you joining us today. This was a great chat. We learned so much. I've learned a lot just sitting here and talking to you. And many of us, a lot of our college students are on, even perhaps some of our high school students that are on. And just hearing your stories really helps hopefully open people's eyes to realize that there's really no set path. There's really no specific way that you take in life. Life really just kind of opens, like you were saying, open source and leads you. So you started in the Peace Corps, and it led you from one world to outer space. And so that's just an amazing thing. So we want to thank you for taking the time to join us today. We also want to thank all of our colleges that joined us this morning. Thank you for taking the time to come out. If you want to learn more information about the Peace Corps, you can talk to your local recruiter that's there on site with you, or you can also find more information on our website at www.peacecorps.gov. Thank you all for joining us.
Thanks.